Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today for this live stream event. My name is Albina, and I'm the program manager for the Microsoft Reactor San Francisco. I will be sharing session resources with you in the chat, but before we begin, I would like to quickly review two items with you, our code of conduct and event guidelines. First, please take a moment to review our code of conduct. Microsoft Reactor seems to provide respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. We do encourage engagement in the chat, but please be mindful of your commentary. Remain professional and on topic. Our secondly is our event guidelines. This session is being recorded and will be available on demand through the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel in about 24 to 48 hours. I will be sharing the link in the chat for your YouTube channel. And if you don't have been on a live stream before with YouTube, please know that you need to have an account on YouTube in order to access and interact in the chat. You can set that up right now. And if you're unable to use the chat and you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us through the social media or meetup page. Which brings us to today's session, Testing My Website with Playwright, the Reactor Code Lab. This session will run approximately 60 minutes, and I'm going to bring in our speaker, Sam, which is our Microsoft Cloud Advocate. Hi, Sam.
Hello, thank you so much. And hello, everybody. I am Sam Wronski. I am a regional cloud advocate here at Microsoft. My job is to help empower all of you to build awesome things with Microsoft technology. This is the Reactor Code Lab. The intent of this is to kind of show the process of learning a new thing in software development. This is a common thing that you're going to have to do, regardless of where you are in your career as a software engineer. You're going to need to learn the newest thing, or pick up some new thing, or try to solve some new problem that you've never faced before. So in this case, we're going to be taking a look at how you can write end-to-end tests using Playwright to test websites. So Playwright is this really cool open source tool built by Microsoft and then open source, so you can go and grab it and use it on your own projects. And what it does is it allows you to run end-to-end website tests against any browser that you would like, whether that's desktop browsers or mobile browsers, and then run them in either a headed or headless fashion. And what that means is there's a UI. So if it's a headed session, that means you can actually see what's going on. This web page has a head. It's got something that you can see. But if it's headless, that means that you might be running this in like a CI instance, for example. So like a GitHub action or something like that, where you don't necessarily have a front end and you can't necessarily see what's actually happening. This can run that, take screenshots of what would be shown on the screen, and then give you a way to actually look back at that trace later and see what would have appeared. What did this web page look like, and why is that important? So that's what we're going to be kind of experimenting with today. Is we're going to be kind of writing our first end-to-end tests in Playwright and seeing how we can take advantage of that. So Playwright lets you write this in a bunch of different languages. I am currently in between selecting TypeScript, JavaScript, or .NET. Somebody types in the chat really fast and suggests one of those. We can use that. Otherwise, we're probably going to start with .NET and then switch over to TypeScript, because there's kind of different things that would be interesting to see. And I imagine if you're working on the front end, you probably are starting with TypeScript or JavaScript first, and then maybe one of these other languages. So this kind of wraps into your backend. The cool thing with Playwright and how all of this works is that you don't necessarily need to know how to code in order to start creating these tests. There's a test recorder that you can use that will actually give you a visual way to set up and write tests and get those committed into your project without ever having to actually write code yourself. So that's really a useful way to do that if you aren't necessarily an engineer on the team, or you aren't familiar with the code. You can still start writing tests. This is cool for like program managers or something like that, or product managers. So let's just get started and try all of this. If you're curious and want to learn more about this, you can find it on playwright.dev. It will get you all the fun getting started stuff. What we want to do is choose the language we're going to start with. So I'm going to pick .NET, and we're going to work with it from there. So let's get started. Important note is that all of these docs are language specific. Playwright's going to install different tools depending on what you're using. So we're going through the .NET stuff. We're going to get .NET based tooling as part of that. So another thing with .NET, there are two testing platforms that you can kind of choose from, NUnit or MS Test. If you're using XUnit and that's sort of your testing platform of choice, I have seen people get that working. There's examples of making that happen, but this documentation doesn't have that laid out for you yet. So let's go and create some tests. So open up Visual Studio Code, go into our terminal, and create a project. And so because we're going to be kind of testing both .NET and the JavaScript side of this, I'm going to be doing that inside of two separate projects. You can kind of tinker around there. So we'll just run this. So we're going to start with NUnit. I'm more familiar with NUnit and XUnit than I am with MS Test. So that's what I'm going to be using. Again, if you don't want to, if you want to use MS Test, you can just click over and everything will switch over and use the correct things. It should be mostly the same here. Yeah, the only difference is the NuGet package you're going to use, and then some of the test scaffolding that's going to be in the project later. So now that we have that, let's add the package so we can actually use this new fun thing we just got. So we've created an empty project. It looks like this. It's using the latest version of C#, so you will see like a separate usings thing. This is global usings. If you're unfamiliar with that, I believe it was added in .NET 7. I'm not entirely sure when it was introduced, but what this is a global way to introduce usings. A global using statement like this means every file in this namespace is going to be using this namespace. So because we're always going to be looking for NUnit stuff, we're just going to insert that as a global using so that we don't need to add it to the top of every single file. So that's kind of a nice little thing that it does automatically for you. Let's go and add this package. Are we in the right place? I don't think I am. Oh, I am. Okay, cool. So what we should have seen is now we have this Playwright package introduced into our .NET project. And so we can use this to kind of write our tests. So the next step is going to be building this. And the reason we need to build this is because of this fourth step. I mentioned there was like .NET specific tooling. The way this works is it actually brings in extra PowerShell scripts to actually run Playwright into your build directory. So if we do a .NET build, okay, let me make this a little bit bigger. But if we build this, inside of this bin thing, we're going to see some Playwright stuff pop up. Came along with global usings came along with C# 10 and .NET 6, I'm pretty sure. I think that's what I was getting confused over is C# versions and .NET versions, as I was getting those mixed up. Thank you so much for calling that out. Yeah, global usings are super cool. Very, very big fan. Waiting for them to come to Unity. But anyway, so we have our .NET build. This is pulling a bunch of things in, and we should eventually see a PowerShell script end up inside of here. If you're using, say, JavaScript, you won't see a PowerShell script get installed. Instead, you're going to get a npm package that's going to be able to run. So you'll get different things depending on what you're trying to do. So let's go and... Okay, this is taking a little bit longer than I expected, but that's okay. Keep in mind, I am still learning this. That's kind of the idea, the premise behind this show is let's learn things together. So there's no rehearsal before this. It's literally me picking something and trying to figure out how to make this work. So we're going to explore. But here we go. We get this playwright.ps1. What this is going to do is just run Playwright. So it's going to run that Playwright DLL and then execute that. And so we can use that as a way to actually start all this project. So how does it work? All right, so the first thing it's going to do is actually install this. My shell doesn't know what PowerShell is or PWSH is. That isn't defined for me because I have done this part before. So that doesn't actually work for me, but I'm already in a PowerShell terminal, so it should just work. So the way this works is you're going to get sent to bin/something debug. Let's. I'm in the wrong directory, so I'm getting confused. Let's do playwright. There we go. And then run this. So start with a dot because we're executing the script, and do dot/bin debug net6. So in the playwright documentation, net is followed by just a question mark, basically, of insert your version here. So we created a .NET 6 project, so we're going to go into net 6. Depending on the version of .NET you're using, this number is going to change. So your actual directory you're going to want to go into is going to be different. I could see this becoming a problem as well if you hard code this directory into your testing projects and things like that. If you update .NET, that version might change underneath you. And so your hard links to this PowerShell script might no longer work. So something to keep in mind. But then we can just do playwright, and we want to install this. And so this is going to install all the playwright stuff that we need, and it's done. And then I think we're ready to go. So what this install is doing is actually installing custom browsers that are intended to be run with playwright. So they're versions of the browsers. Mine went really quick. I'm pretty sure that's because I already have done this step. If you haven't, I believe this takes a little bit just to actually pull down the browsers and actually run them. Playwright can run against Safari. It can run against Firefox and Chromium-based things. So that would cover Chrome and Edge and Opera and all the other browsers. So those are sort of the platforms that you can target with this. That's what this install is doing, is getting those set up. There's a bunch of other things that file can do. We're actually going to use that later to do some other things. One of my favorite things, one of the things that got me really interested in this, was the tracing feature where you can actually capture a trace of a test and then replay that later. So it'll capture snapshots at every point in your test and show you what happened. So let's grab this test and run it. And so we're just going to grab all of that and throw it into our project. So let's get out of our bin folder, go into our unit test. So this is a end unit test. We're mostly going to be looking at how to write end-to-end tests with this. Maybe there's other applications for this that I'm not thinking about, but that seems like the majority of the test cases that you're going to be writing with this kind of tool. And so an end unit test has setups and then the tests that you can run. It also has teardowns as well. I'm not entirely familiar with what that's called because I'm more familiar with XUnit, but we're in end unit. So let's just paste this example in and then use this instead. There's a few important changes here with doing what I just did. First off, we made the test parallelizable, which means that it can be run in parallel. We also are now extending a class. So previously, actually, it's probably better if we just write this from scratch. Let's do that. So let's do a page test. I believe that's what we need. And I'm actually going to move because this project is intended for testing playwright stuff, doing end-to-end tests, I'm going to move this using into my global usings. So we're just going to do this. And there we go. Which means that using line is no longer needed. It just simplifies things a little bit and keeps these files cleaner. Because ideally, I think all of our tests would end up with that file anyway, or that using. So this just gets rid of it. And then the next thing is this test. So it's an async task. It's going to go and run a bunch of things. Let's go and just copy this page that we're going to do and run this. And so this needs to be async because all of these tasks are going to be asynchronous. They're going to be communicating with a web page and waiting for that to finish whatever it's doing, and then returning control back to the user. The cool thing with Playwright is it doesn't have like sleeps and waits. Instead, it's going to be based a lot on go to this page, and then you will get control back once that page is ready to be interacted with. This is different than some of the other like end-to-end testing things I've used, especially when I was first writing end-to-end tests. It was press the A key, now sleep for 1,000 milliseconds, now press the, I don't know, some other key. That's really flaky. It can cause all sorts of issues later on in your testing that this avoids. One of the problems with doing those sleeps is what happens if it doesn't take 1,000 milliseconds? What if it takes 10? Now you just wasted 990 of them, which is it sounds small. It's only 1 second. But if you have to run that test 10 times a day and you have 2,000 tests, suddenly that 1 second is no longer 1 second. It's now half an hour. And that's not very fun to actually just sit and wait for your computer to do nothing. So by actually triggering things based off of what actually happens and what you're actually expecting the state to be, you can build more reliable and less flaky tests. So there we go. What we're doing is just creating a test that says, go to this web page. It's not actually testing anything. It's just sending a web browser to a specific page. In this case, we're going right back to the Playwright website. So there's that. Let's just test Playwright header, I think. So we're just going to look at the title on the Playwright website and say, does this work? So if I say playwright.dev, I want it to say something about Playwright. We'll look at one of these things. I think their example looks at the title and says, does the title have Playwright in it? So we can use that as sort of our test. And I think just kind of leave it there. So if we run this, we don't have regular expressions yet imported. So let's do that. This time not as a global using. So there we go. And so what we're saying is we expect the title of the page to have Playwright in it. So somewhere inside of that should be the word Playwright. And then the page in this case is actually already defined for us. It's not like some static variable. If you do not extend this page test, suddenly this code breaks. That's because the page test is actually giving you this expect and the page variable. It's actually storing content about the page. So if you want to use that, you have to make sure you have this extension. I screwed that up the first time I was trying this. What language is this? This is in C#. So we're writing in C#. If you're unfamiliar with C#, Playwright also supports other languages. I would recommend starting with like TypeScript, but I believe it also supports things like Java and Python, if that's something you're more familiar with. But this is just C#, C#6, or .NET 6, C#10, I believe, if I have my versions correct. So this test is going to go to Playwright. It's going to see, ask, does the title have Playwright in it? So let's run this. I'm going to skip all of this for now. We can come back to the rest of what's on this sample test later. So let's go and run this. So I probably don't actually need, I should have one that already exists. There we go. So let's go and do a studying C++ in college. Awesome. Cool. I struggled a lot with C++ when I was in school. That is a language that I still struggle to wrap my head around. Pointers gave me headaches. It's one of the reasons that I really liked C#. If you are learning C++, one of the cool things with C# is it does like COM stuff. So you can actually invoke like C++ functions directly from your C# code. So you don't need to write everything in like lower level C++. I've used that a few times in the past, and it was really cool. So good luck with school. I think the school year just started, so hopefully it's fun. So let's see. We ran this and it didn't work. Async method isn't defined. Must have a non-void return type. I'm not returning anything. Am I? Oh, I know what's going on. Let's go back here. I didn't update this function, so it's still returning a void. Async functions return a task or a task containing something. So we're going to return a task. There we go. And so if we run this now, we shouldn't see anything. We're just running this. And again, Playwright supports headless mode, which means there is no visual graphic display. So we ran a browser, but we didn't see a browser. So we got test results. Learned a bit of Python last semester. Oh, fun. Python is another language that I've only used briefly. I had to learn it for a previous job and haven't kept up with it. It's a really fun and powerful language, though. I really enjoyed it. And for like building really quick websites, especially like backend stuff with Flask, I found that really fun. So awesome. What browser did we run? That is a great question. I believe it's Chromium. I believe it's a Chromium-based browser, but I can figure out how to test that. I have never actually asked that question, so I don't know the answer. My goal has mostly just been to like prove that it works, and then now we're doing the stream. So let's go and find out. What did we just do? Because I don't actually know. Oh, it's right there. Okay, perfect. So the default is Chromium. So we just ran a test that invoked Chromium, but we can configure that using a browser environment variable and launch configuration. So how would we change that? If we go to our launch configuration, let's see, customizing browser context. So we can do this. That's fun. What the browser context thing is doing is sometimes, like if you have an adaptive website, which is pretty common, I think, now, especially now, if you have like a mobile device, you're going to use a reactive page that's going to resize content to fit on the device it's being viewed on. You can change what that is. You can even change like the defined color scheme. So you can see what does the dark and light theme look like. So you can actually try to figure that stuff out. If we want, I think we can change that. And then it looks like the actual customization of this can either be passed in as a parameter. So if we want to do that, go here and look back at our test. If we had 2 dashes here, it's actually going to switch us into actually looking at that, and I copied too much. And then we have some Playwright settings. So I think we're passing in Chromium. Let's try Firefox and see how that goes. I've never tried this, so I have no idea what's going to happen. So that's, I think, how you would switch this. And again, we don't see anything. This is running in the backend. So behind all of this, you won't see anything. Also, our test is really fast. So even if it was showing a browser, it would only pop up momentarily and then go away. But let's go and take a look at tracing. So one of the things I might be interested in is actually showing to, say, a PM or somebody else on the team, this actually works. And here's what it did. Because just saying, yes, this has passed is great. But if you actually want it to work, it could be a little bit tough. So let's go and take a look at how to do that. So I'm going to open up this section on trace viewing. So there's a bunch of fun stuff here. This is actually doing a bunch of extra stuff. So kind of skipping around sort of what we had created previously. But what you can do is, let's zoom in a little bit. You can start tracing here. So that's actually going to say, start watching all of these commands. So in our case, we said, go to this web page and then look for this specific thing. We might also want to like find a button and click that button and then see where that takes us. Does that take us to the right page? For example, if you have like a shopping cart or something and you want to click the checkout buttons, does that take you to the checkout experience, or does it send you back to the home page or something like that? Weird things that can like break the flow just to make sure that it's all working. This gives you a way to do some of that and actually validate that it's working. So let's set up a trace on this test we just ran, and then we can add a little bit more to the test to see what's going on and actually try to test things. So some of this stuff is already done because of the thing we've been doing, or because we used a extension class, or not extension class, because we inherited this page test. Words. We get some of this for free. So some of this is already defined for us. When will there be something dedicated to Windows developers? That is a great question. What would you like to cover about Windows developers? I've done some interesting stuff. Mostly, I think I've focused a lot on like cross-platform and open source stuff. I found that can be a really good platform to kind of build on, and it can help you target multiple different things at once. If there's something specific though, that like some Windows specific thing that would be really useful, let me know, and I would love to talk about that, because I use Windows as my main dev machine for everything. So if there's a way I can share that would help, then yeah, let me know. Let's see here. We want to set up tracing. That's not going to work. Let's go and grab the stuff. So I'm just going to actually copy this entire section. We're actually going to pull out. Is it possible to combine some languages? I'm not sure what you mean. If you're talking about like general programming stuff, the answer is yes, with limits. So for example, we're talking about .NET here. So we're using the .NET platform, which in that case, we're using C# running on .NET. But there's a bunch of different things that you can actually use in .NET that all interoperate together. They all work together. So you can use Visual Basic, or you can use F#, or some other languages. There's a bunch of actual languages that can kind of plug into the same thing. That's sort of how .NET works. It compiles things into an intermediate language, which is then used to actually interact with everything. So this code gets compiled into some other code, which then gets run by the .NET runtime. And because it's compiled into something else in between, that intermediate language can be compiled into by a bunch of different languages. So any language that compiles into that can work with other parts of the framework. Something similar happens with Java, for example. So you have Java and then Groovy, and I'm forgetting all the other stuff, but there's a bunch of languages that actually work with the Java environment. So you can also use something like that. Typically, though, my recommendation, if you want to use multiple different languages, is not to integrate them into the same project, but is to actually use APIs. One of the things we've seen is like microservices. And what that is building smaller components that are separated by APIs that you can then talk to between one and another service. And then it doesn't matter. You can write it in anything you want and it will just work. So that's one of the cool things with something like a microservice. Playwright should be able to handle single page applications. Yes, it should. One of the things we were looking at previously, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. That's okay. Where did I got lost. That's okay. Let's go and look at test runners, because I think that's where we were seeing this. But you can actually configure a browser context. And so I would probably start with this for things that are doing like single page applications. Because it's just running a browser behind the scenes, that's how it's going to work. So if you want to try like changing the size of the screen or something, there's probably a way to do that. I unfortunately haven't tested that, so I'm not sure. I remember there being an event dedicated to Windows developers. called Windows Developer Days. Can I expect something similar this year? I don't know. I can take a look. If you want to reach out to me, then do that. I can try to answer that as best as I can. But right now, I don't know anything about that yet. So sorry. Yeah. All right. Tracing. Let's go ahead and do some tracing. I already pulled this into the project, so let's grab this. And then I'm going to just kind of walk through what this is doing, and then we can kind of pick the parts that we actually want and fit them into our project. So the first thing it's doing is launching a browser. We already do this. That's part of this page test, is actually launching that browser for us. So I don't think we need that. And then the other thing is actually creating a new context. So context should already exist as part of our thing. Yeah, I remember the Windows Dev Days, because I've been to them as a non-Microsoft person. I just don't know anything about that right now, unfortunately. So yeah, like I said, reach out to me and I will try to do that. Otherwise, I will probably just post something if I find out the information, and hopefully that's helpful. We'll see. So what we want to do is grab this context. I believe there's a context, capital C. So you just need to change that in this page test. I believe it's just already defined here somewhere inside of this. So context test has a context, a browser context. And that stores all the information about what the browser is configured to do. So we can actually grab that and use it in our test to begin tracing our test. And so what this is going to do is we're going to say collect snapshots and the sources and everything else about this test. And then go to a new page. I don't think I need any of this. So this is coming from the example. So we're going to just delete that and try using what we've already done. So our test is what I just highlighted. Let's move that into the middle here. And so now we have a page that's going to go to our Playwright site. And then we're going to just say expect it to have a specific title. And then at the end of that, stop tracing and save that trace to a specific location. So we're going to save that to trace.zip. And then if we run this, nothing's going to change. So let's keep it at Firefox because I don't know why. And so let's run that. And everything should run exactly the same. The only difference is now we actually have this zip file in these results called trace.zip. And we can actually use this in a bunch of different fun ways. So one way is to actually pull this into a local tool. So there's just a show trace. So let's try that. So show trace, that's not going to work. Let's do show trace, and we want to do trace.zip. So just point it to the zip file that you created. And if we run this, no trace exists. That's because I'm in the wrong directory. Let's do that again. Oops. This file doesn't exist. What? I'm sorry. Let's try this. And if not, I have a backup. So we're gonna go back to that. So trace.zip doesn't exist. Okay. Weird, but let's try a absolute path because I think there we go. All right, got it. So you have to use an absolute path for this. I think I've run into that before when I was just quickly tinkering with this. So sorry for that, but I guess that's kind of helpful to know. If you're getting couldn't find the file, just make sure it's pointing to a absolute path. So I just stuck the current directory into this and then ran the script again, and we got this. So this is the results of our trace. This is what happened when we ran our test. So from when we started that tracing session to when we ended it, this is what we saw in our browser. And so this gives you actually like all the browser tools that you are probably used to. And the cool thing is, you can remember what our test is doing. It was going to a page, and then it was going to test an assertion. And you can actually see those highlighted inside of the test. So if we highlight this, you can see how long every part of this test took. It's not just screenshots, it's actually a timeline showing you everything that happened along that timeline. So in this case, we can see it took 650 milliseconds for the page to get loaded to the point of it being complete. Even though at 400 milliseconds, we had a page, maybe all of it wasn't loaded. Like you can see the image isn't loaded in until 200 milliseconds later. So you can actually kind of see what's happening inside of your app. And then eventually we get it loaded and we test this and it's done. This isn't that exciting because nothing happened. Like we didn't do anything in this test, but it is cool because you can actually see everything that was happening on the page and it's captured for you, and then you can use all that. This is using the local tool though. One of the cool things with this is you just get a zip file and it can work in other places. So we can go to trace.playwright.dev and we'll get the same trace viewer, but we'll get it online. So let's say you want to use this as something for like a CI project. I wouldn't necessarily recommend using this as a CI tool inside of something private. If you do not want to send things to like a public thing, I generally recommend, even if this isn't sending it anywhere, generally recommend against sending your private stuff to a public web page to kind of view them. So keep that in mind. But if you have like an open source project or your personal blog or something like that you can send the CI project here. So let's go and grab this. And I'm going to move it over here for now. And then just drag over our trace.zip. And nothing happens. Let's see here. Let me try that again. Sorry. Let's move this there. Do that. And go and find our trace. Sorry for the weird thing. I was expecting this to just support drag and dropping, and it's not quite working, and I'm not sure why. So I'm just going to select it manually. You can also provide a specific link. So if you're doing this in a CI project, you can upload your trace as an artifact and then plug into this tool. So let's select that, open, and there we go. So here is our tool again, and we get everything back. So this gives us all the same stuff we had, just running in a web browser. So we didn't need to do anything to like install any tools on our computer or do anything extra to see this. So you don't need to be a developer and have a developer machine set up. You can just get sent to this page and you can view these. And so you get the same stuff with all of our restrictions on where this is going. So that's how that works. Let's go and make our test a little bit more complicated, and we can actually see in our traces how that changes. So in this case, we're just sending this to find a title. Let's go and actually like click buttons and do things like that. So we go here to, I mean, we could try changing the size of our browser, but let's not do that yet. Instead, let's go and use a locator. So what this is going to do is actually find something on the page with the text that you give it, or some search that you give it. So in this case, we're saying the Playwright homepage should have a title that says Playwright. That's the first thing we're testing. But we also want to do a get started page. So if we go to the Playwright website, here we go. You can see there's this big get started button. So what we're going to say is we want to say, find the get started button, click on that, and get sent to learn how to get started with Playwright. So that's the next test, the next part of this test. We're going to validate we get to the home page, and then we're going to go into the next thing. Testing can be weird. I tend to be really nitpicky about testing. End-to-end testing can get hard and really weird. And it can be expensive just on a time scale. Doing end-to-end tests against like large production systems can just take a lot of time, both in writing the tests, but also in executing them. And so sometimes you'll see them like collapse into a test that does a lot of things. Keep in mind when you start collapsing tests and doing lots of steps inside of one test, instead of separating them out, when you do that, it becomes harder to actually pinpoint what goes wrong. So if you have all of your tests and you're just gonna, in one test, go across your entire website and just like click every link on the page, great. But if one link doesn't work, if that test is just going to fail, and then you're going to have to figure out which link didn't work. The other option is if you have a test for every link that is testing specific like user flows and things like that, you'll get more useful information faster. So you're going to learn more quickly what didn't work. And that can be really useful. That's one of the reasons why the recommendation is to do so many unit tests, because when you build those unit tests, they're testing just one thing. And so if that test breaks, you know exactly where to go. End-to-end tests get a little bit harder because they're just bigger. This is covering a whole bunch of stuff. Like if this doesn't work, figuring out how to fix it is really hard if you don't have those other tests to help you figure out how to find that. So keep that in mind when you're writing these things. I could go on, but it's kind of outside of the scope of this video. So let's figure out how to press this button. So go here. We're going to use a locator to actually find the get started page. And we can actually find something else. Let's do that. So one of the ways that I like to learn is to take an existing piece of code for something that I'm trying to pick up and learn and change it just a little bit. So figure out how you think it works and then change it in a way that you think would align with that. So that actually kind of accounts for those changes. So in this case, we're going to click get started. So if I go here, we'd click get started. What if I want to go to the docs? Because I think, yeah, it sends you to the same place. So let's go and click the docs button instead. So if we want to do that, we can go here. And instead of this, let's just say find docs on the page and go and do something with that. And then, so what that's going to do is actually just basically move your mouse over whatever the thing is. And then we want to actually do something with that. So in this case, we're going to have an expectation about where it's going to send us. And that's what this is going to do. Expect the new get started page to be linked to a specific point on your website. Cool thing with this is it is relative. So it's actually pointing to a specific thing. So it's not like a specific URL. It is actually the reference inside of the project. So you can actually keep those relative links and they'll still work. And then we'll click it. And then we'll validate that. So let's go and just insert all three of these and get lost. There we go. So the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to say, go out and find this get started page. And then say, this should have a specific attribute. So it looks like these expects are a builder type pattern. Yeah, I'm not super familiar with front end stuff, so I can't say about Jest. From what I've seen, I think it's similar, but I cannot tell you what's similar and what's different. This isn't just a C# thing though. I think that's one of the cool things with Playwright is it supports Java, .NET, Python, and JavaScript and TypeScript. So you could use this if you're building front-end websites in like React and you want to write a test in TypeScript because you're already using that, you can write these tests in that and it will still work. And the cool thing is it should just kind of figure it out and work on whatever language you target. And it will also support things like mobile browsers and things like that. It's very neat. But I don't know enough to be able to compare it to Jest. I know it exists, but I don't know anything about it. So let's see here. So what was I doing? I was going to go and grab this. We expected a get started page to have a specific thing, and that is this attribute. And then we're going to click that link. And then finally, we're going to say, expect our current URL to include intro. So we're now expecting to be on the intro page. So let's run this. I still have the trace viewer running, so let's stop that. Go. And I'm actually going to keep this open. And let's go and do a .NET test. I think that should work. I shouldn't need to add any extra stuff to run this. It should just run this test, and then we'll get a result. And then the reason I'm doing this is so that we have that other terminal open, and I can just jump into a trace view of what we just ran. And it failed. Perfect. Let's go and see why. We might see some other things. Okay, we didn't even get a trace, I don't think. So what happened? What did I break? Okay, so that thing that I changed didn't work. Oh, okay. So what I did is I say select something with docs in it. And it did, but it found two things. So this test broke because we're now saying find one of these things, but we didn't say which one. And so it found two of them, and then figured that out. Why don't you use VS 2022? I do use Visual Studio 2022. I actually use like a bunch of different editors. It's weird. For lots of like web dev stuff, and typically my starting point is actually in Visual Studio Code. It's just where I've worked more. I've done a lot with more like Kubernetes and infrastructure stuff. And so this I've set it up and I like it. So that's what I use. If I'm doing like a really long coding session and I'm going to be writing lots of code, I'm going to jump over and do an IDE. But I've found that I've moved into like terminals and this more often, just because it kind of flexes and fits a little bit nicer. And IDs, it can take a little bit of time to actually like get set up and actually get into a flow with. So it's just a personal preference thing. All right. So we need to figure out how to pick this a little bit better. This is actually kind of cool. I'm glad we found this because what this is telling me is that it's actually going to avoid things like flaky results, because I think these are going to send you to two different places. Or at least theoretically they could. Maybe you have like a learn more section on your blog or something, and that's going to actually send you out to the next thing or whatever, like the actual page. If all of your blog posts have a read more, learn more, if that's happening, how do you know which one you're picking when you're running your test? And so you want to be specific, because otherwise it might work, and then maybe the behavior changes and now it doesn't work. And that's really, really hard to figure out why that happened. So this can avoid that. That's cool. Let's go and see if we can do this better, because I think what happened is it actually looked down here and found this docs header, and then this docs at the very top of the web page. So it's looking at those two things and saying, these both exist. Which one did you mean? And I don't really know. So let's pick API, I think. And then we can break our test in a different way. That should be fun. So let's go see if this works. So if we do this, we're actually testing to see if the API works. Our test still failed because it resolved to 4 elements. Okay, let's just skip this. I think it's get started. Just because I'm slowly running out of time and trying to be sneaky and pick the correct thing. Element selection by ID is supported as well. I don't know. I think we can actually, that can be something we can actually figure out. So let me show you what we're kind of trying to get to, because I just made the change. And then let's figure out how we can do that. Let's actually use like an ID selection so we can pick that. One of the reasons that I like the text selection as like your go-to is because that's how you're going to actually interact with a user if you're talking about something. You're going to say, oh yeah, go to the homepage and click on the docs section, and you're going to learn more about the website. So they're going to go to your homepage and pick the first docs thing that they see, and then they're going to go from there. But if it goes somewhere you didn't intend, then oops. So this kind of gives you a way to test it that way by testing what the user sees rather than like the programming side behind the scenes that nobody's going to look at. So that's one of the reasons that I do like the text-based selection. All right. So now we have a little bit more interesting trace. I can zoom in this. That's super cool. So I think this is just an embedded browser. I'd have to double check. Yeah. So it's just an embedded Chromium thing. So in this case, we now have the 5 steps of our test, because that's what our test is doing. And these trace right back to the actual lines of code that I wrote. So first we're going to go to the Playwright website. That's this blue bar up here. And then we're going to test that it has a specific title that's happening right here. And then we're going to go and find the button. And you can actually see, I think, yeah, you can see us click this button. So as we kind of scrub over the top here, we can actually see what's happening. And so we're going here, we're clicking the button, you can see it gets pressed, and then we end up going back to this new installation page and getting started, which is where we started this whole project. So we end up here, and it looks like it's using the light mode here. So we can actually change that. That's another browser setting. So if we wanted to switch over to using dark mode, because maybe you want to make sure that that works, you can test that. So let's figure out how to go back and get that docs change to work. So in this case, we're using text equals get started. And if we wanted to use docs originally and it didn't work, so let's go and figure out how to make this work. So if I run this again, just to validate, one of the useful things with testing is making a broken test first. So a test that doesn't pass, so you know that the test actually is testing something, and then you can fix it and make it work. So now that we know it fails, when it passes, we'll be a little bit more confident that it's actually a good test, rather than just a test that's always green or flaky or whatever. So this will give us a little bit more confidence. So what we want to do is change this. So find the selector or the locator and change how it works. I don't know how to use these. So we're going to have to go and find something, but there's a page on Locator. So let's go and check this. You can find by text, by CSS, or by ID. So you can find it by like CSS class, I think. I am not a front-end person, so if I use the wrong terminology, I'm sorry. But you could find it by CSS, so something that is styled in a specific way, so like a button that has the sign-up styling. Or you could just say, find the sign-up thing. So let's go and figure out what this is. We can just inspect this. Again, I'm not at all familiar with the best way to do this. Let's go and do this. So we want this docs page. Or actually, let's make let's go somewhere different because it will actually tell us something useful. So let's go to this API page and inspect that. Also don't know the best way to actually navigate a lot of this, but we're going to grab that, I think. That's not going to work. Right? Because this is a class for a menu link, which isn't unique. So it's not going to select it by like ID or anything. It's going to just select a menu link. And I'm sure we have a bunch of these. So I think if I tried to use that, it would not work. This one has a unique class. We could see if the GitHub link works. But I'm wondering if you can combine these. It's like we're saying go to text and also find something with menu link as its ID. Does this work? And at this point, I am completely just riffing to see what happens. So want to be very clear here. I'm not really expecting this to work. I'm just curious. Oh, and there's also a first option. So we could find the first occurrence of docs on the page. We might try that next. So let's see what happens here. I definitely don't expect this to work. So if we run this, what happens? Bunch of red text or nothing. Yeah, okay. So it doesn't know what this is. We are running into this issue. It looks like we're actually like running the test and then running into these issues, which makes sense because it's C# code. It's going to do a sequential thing. But that's how this works. The downside of that is these kind of errors you won't find unless you run all your test suite. So you have to run your test suite to actually see that this didn't work, which I have one test. Still takes a few seconds. If you have thousands of them, would be useful to figure out how to run just the one test like this. So figuring out how to do that in your workflow. So you can just run the one test so you don't get thousands and thousands and thousands of tests running. You probably don't have thousands and thousands of end-to-end tests, but if you do, you don't want to sit around for hours because you wanted to test one thing. So let's get rid of this and let's just find the first. We're going to find the first docs link, API link on the page. And this should break, I think, still. So you should still get a failed test. One of the interesting things that I'm trying to figure out is if failed tests still generate a trace or not. Because it might be useful to see, like, this test didn't work. Here's where it sent you. Expected to have attribute href, but was something else. Okay, so what this did is it found the API link and expected it to go somewhere else. And so it was expecting it to go to docs/intro, but actually it was going to docs/API/class/playwright. So let me end this here. And then I really need to wrap this up, but there we go. I'm going to quickly run this and then see if that trace gets generated. Otherwise, we can kind of leave that there. The only thing that I need to change is some of these links. But it looks like it's still, yeah, so it isn't generating a trace. Anyway, I'm going to leave it here. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining and participating in the chat. Really appreciate that. It's super fun. If you do give this a shot, let me know. I would love to hear it because that's why I do what I do. It's super fun to see people pick up some of the tools and kind of integrate them into what they're doing. You can find all of this stuff on playwright.dev. It's an open source project, so you can actually see what's happening out on GitHub and learn more about that. If you did like this, we do have a survey. I don't know where the link is, but if you like this and you want to see more stuff like this, then let us know there. That's probably the best way to do it. That'll tell me to do more or do less or whatever. There we go. Sorry about that. So if you fill this out, that would really help me. Kind of tells me I'm doing a good job or should do something else. Otherwise, thanks so much for joining, and I hope you all have a great day. So thanks, everyone.